I now recognize Mr. Woodall for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll pick up, Mayor, where my colleague left off. It is an amazing thing that you all have done, bringing economic incentives. It's easier to invest $350 million if I can save $150 million along the way. I believe there should be a different set of regulations for the best actors in our community. We're using that same membrane technology in my suburb north of Atlanta. We're pumping our water back into our reservoir cleaner than we took it out, just like you are. Tell me about the efficacy from an executive's perspective of having a different set of standards for the good actors and a training wheels set of standards for those folks that we're still trying to get up to code.
Well, thank you, because I am not the nerd in the room. I'm not an engineer by any means, but to see it from my perspective as running a large utility, you hit the nail on the head, which is to give rewards to those that are innovative. I was one of the first in the country to do integrated planning. We're now going to have trouble signing a permit because they're going to try to hold us to a standard that no technology in this community can ever, in this country, can meet. Rather, we'd like to start spending those dollars where our citizens see it. I passed a street levy, received 77% passage because they saw the integrated effectiveness of that, and they see the real-world outcomes from that. From my handout, you see that now our CSO tanks have parks on them for one of our school, or a playground for one of our schools. We actually had to come all the way back here to the Department of Transportation. One of our infiltration sites is land that the federal government owns along I-90, one of the federal highways. It originally had been a place where a considerable amount of vagrancy had happened, and it was very unsafe for the individuals that were there. It's now an infiltration site, but the federal government had never allowed this to happen because it was on their property on an on-ramp. But this is how we were to look at saving that $150 million. The citizens see that. I come from a part of the country that is very progressive in environmental standards. But that being said, they also are very cognizant of the cost. And my citizens, one of the poorest legislative districts in the state, and as you see from the Alice rate, you know, a family of four is left with $400 or $500 to pay for rent when you take out the utility costs. So we need to look at these innovative approaches, but also look at somewhere in the federal government where you can have that integrated approach. We get points for integration, but we still are applying on multiple different locations or sources to get those dollars, and then lining up the cash flow when those are due, when they have to be spent by, and it's a Rubik's Cube that is not plausible for smaller governments. We're able to do it, but we're at about 210,000. I don't think you could do it for cities much smaller than that.
Yeah, but for cities north of 210,000, do you think this is a model that is applicable across the country, or you have the particular leadership and the particular circumstances that you can make it work when others can't?
I would hope the latter. I'd think the latter, but no, it's replicable. The issue is, and that's why when you simplify it and have grant pools that reward a single location for these integrated projects, I realize the difficulty. I worked in the federal government for some time, but you have some instances where this has happened throughout, whether it be at the Department of Transportation and the grants that came out that looked at integrating different projects, and so I think it can be done, especially on the authorization side, especially when we look at policy of how that could be rewarded for innovation across this country, because we can drop that cost and get real benefits to our citizens. Believe it or not, most of my citizens, thankfully, when they flush the toilet, it flushes the same way before we did $350 million and the same way afterwards. So they've got to see the ability and see the real outcomes, and they've seen that in their infrastructure in my community, and really have rewarded us in giving us that confidence to continue down this path.